So in this video, we're going to be going over both of our gutter guard options, as well as all the tools and things you will need to install them. And then after we show you everything, we're going to be installing the gutter guards, showing you how to do the corners, how to flush them together, the whole process. So before we get into the actual guards themselves, we're going to go over the tools. So we have our zip screws, just like you would use anytime for a gutter. We typically use our black zip screws for these because they look nice with the black guard. If you're doing this guard, you can use white or whatever color you think looks best. Mainly we try to use black for both of them though. Moving on, we have our impact drill here. This is what we use to install the zip screws into the gutter guard. And then we have our gutter bit here, or our hex bit. This is what is used to screw in the zip screw. So this all goes together like this, all right? And then we have our snips here, used to cut the corners of the guards, as well as if we need to cut off any extra, if we need to, for some reason, cut the any type of like flashing or metal that's in the way, the drip edge is flashed up and we need to cut a corner off. Anything that you need snips for, but their main purpose is to cut the angles and the corners of these guards. So let's go ahead and get into these guards here. We have our first option. This is our basic gutter guard. So you can see here that it kind of has these wave points. And what this does is when the leaves, fall onto the guard, it allows them to blow off very carefully, instead of just, getting stuck on there, because when it's flat, it uses a suction so it sticks. When it has these ridges, it allows air to get underneath it and lift it up. With this one, we insert our screws. We have one here, we have one in the middle, and then we have one on the end. Now there is a bunch of pre-drilled holes, so if you see the guard after you put it on, if their gutter is a little bit misshaped and you see the guard start to lift up in an area, pop another screw in. You can always put them in any spot that doesn't have a hole. It doesn't matter, but it is easier when you have these pre-drilled. So how this gutter guard sits is it sits in the gutter and it has this little drop down point. So it's kind of like a mini gutter inside of here essentially, and then all the debris falls through here. This one actually sits directly on top of the gutter and does not go underneath. So underneath the shingle or anything else, this one slips underneath the shingle. This one sits directly on the top of the gutter. All right, so moving on here, we have our second gutter guard. This is our premium option. So this is a little bit more expensive and a little bit better material. It's a little bit harder to drill through with the zip screws because this is a stronger metal. It has this micro mesh. And like I said, again, this one gets tucked up underneath the shingle versus sitting on top of it. So it'll actually sit at an angle like this inside the gutter. It has this ridge here that you can see. And this is how the water, when the water flows down from the shingle and reaches this point, the water drips through at this point, and that's how it keeps the gutter clean, because this micro mesh really doesn't allow anything to get through it. So that's pretty much both of the guards and all the tools you will need to install the guards. So now that we have showed you everything, let's go ahead and install these. All right, so now that we're up here on the roof, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna install our premium gutter guard first. So how we install this one is a little bit different than the black gutter guard. We are going to actually lift up these shingles right here like this and make sure that we have enough room to slide this gutter guard underneath the shingle. So if you want to just do this for 6 or 7 feet first before you do the guard, just to make sure that you can get it under there the whole way, do that. And then you can see here that we have two sides. So we have our smaller side, and then we have our bigger side here. And this side has a lip on the bottom of it. So this lip is actually gonna sit like this, and it's gonna pull on the inside of this gutter, so that way it can close it tightly and it's not gonna move anywhere. So how we install this is, like I said, we're going to lift up our shingle here, and there's two sides to this. So we have our one side that has this extra flap on it, all right, like that. And then we have our flat side. So our flat side is gonna go to the end of the gutter, to the end of the end cap over here. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna lift up our shingle like this, and we're gonna slide it underneath like so. We're gonna head back over to the middle, lift this part up, slide it underneath. All right, same thing with this. We're gonna lift everything up and we're just gonna slide it underneath here. So you wanna do it kind of like in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. And then you can see that it's underneath that shingle now. And then if you come over here, we're gonna wanna make sure that you pull this over to the end of the shingle. and actually kind of past the shingle a bit into the end of the gutter guard. You can see that it has this little side skirt right here, so I'm going to bend out this aluminum, make sure that we cover all of this side over here, all right? And it's going to be raised a little bit, but it's fine because nothing is going to get in between this little crack because there's the aluminum right here. So we're going to pull this forward now, make sure that we have everything in place. All right, so you know, if there's a spot that's not in the right spot, pull it out a bit, all right? And then we're going to take our zip screws and we're going to insert this, our first zip screw to the end. So we're going to take our hand again, if you want to come here and show you a little closer. We're going to pull this gutter guard close like this. Take our first zip screw. We're going to go directly down on this point, like that. Insert our first screw. All right, we're going to head over here to our middle compartment and we're going to add our second screw right here in the middle of the gutter guard, making sure that we're even here, even there. Go down, all right, and then our last and final screw for this piece is going to go right here on the end. So we're going to take our hand, pull this guard in, all right, take our screw, make sure that it's as far out as possible, drill down. All right, so now you can see that we have 1, 2, 3 screws in place. This guard isn't going anywhere, it's secure, it's underneath the shingles in all places like that. We're covered all the way up to the end. And now we're going to add our next section connecting from here to the corner of this gutter. All right, so now that we have our first piece installed here, we're going to go ahead and add our second piece in. I chose this corner because I want to show you guys how we cut this angle. So you can see here that this guard, if we line it up perfectly right here, it's about, you know, maybe 8 or 9 inches long. And we also need to cut this on an angle like this, so that way it's going to fit into this corner. So when we do the next one, we're going to put a corner here and run the next piece, and that's how we do the corners. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flush this up. So we're going to match up these 2 points, the one end here with this end here. All right, and then we're going to visualize, okay, where would this come through? So it's going to come through right here. All right, and then it's going to end right here because you can see the back side of the shingle, so you can imagine a line right here. So we're going to take our snips here and we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our first cut. Now these can get a little tricky to cut because the aluminum is pretty strong, so if you can't cut through it, just keep going at it. You'll be able to. It just takes a minute. And then we're going to go ahead and cut this line through here and then finish it off right through here. All right, and if you can't cut it through this side, you can flip it over, take it from this side. All right, cut it like that. So now we have our piece here. All right, and it's cut to fit in place. So if we line it up back here, that looks pretty good to me. So we're going to, same thing, lift up these shingles here, lift up all of these, make sure we can get it underneath this corner. All right, all these are good. So now that we have all these lifted up, we're going to go ahead and take our guard here and we're going to slip it underneath like that. Come over here, lift these back up, slip these under, and then we're going to do our best to slide this over as far as we can. Now these corners get a little bit tricky with the shingles, so sometimes you might have to go over one of them, might have to go underneath one of them, but you can just play with it a little bit, use your common sense, and cover what needs to be covered. You're going to make sure that you line these two up down here, make sure that this aluminum here, this mesh, is overlapping this first section, and we're going to make sure this matches up good. So we can see that this does. So this next piece is going to fit here and run this way. So now that we have it in place, we're going to go ahead and we're going to screw this in. So our first screw is going to go here. All right, attaching that in. Our second screw is going to go here in the middle. Again, we're going to pull this towards us so that way we can tighten up this gap. Pull it towards us. Screw that one in. All right, and then we're going to add our final screw right here. Again, we're going to pull in this gutter as far as, or this guard as far as we can this way towards us. Screw in. All right, and now we have this corner piece installed and we're ready to install the next corner. All right, so now that we have our first and our second piece installed, we're gonna go ahead and finish off this corner to lead us to our next straight piece. So how we're gonna do this is, again, we're gonna line this up, making sure that we're aligned here in the front so we can get the proper cut, and then making sure that we're aligned here. So we also wanna make sure that when we look through this, we're gonna line up this whole thing. So it actually needs to go a little bit farther this way, because if we're here and we cut it, it's not gonna look right. So we need to make sure, again, that we're all the way to the point, all right? And when we cut it, it's gonna look like this and come through, and then it's gonna come all the way to here. So we're gonna make our first point here, our first cut, and our last point's gonna lead right at the end of this. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take our snips here, and we're gonna make our first cut. Again, like this, we wanna make sure that we are covering the last cut we just made. So if we have to go, you know, a little bit in, we'll go right here. And these things can be really hard to cut, especially this our premium guard option. So you want to get a little bit of force into it. And if you can't cut it, again, ask someone else or switch your snips. These snips are a little bit old, so they're a little dull. So if you need to get some new ones, go in the truck, grab them. All right, so we got that piece off. All right, so now that we have our piece cut here, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna raise up our shingles. So we're gonna go in here and press this up as far as we can. This corner is very important because this can be tricky, especially if the roofers don't do their job right. Like in this place, you can see that for some reason their seam stops here, and this tile, they just decided to cut it off. I don't really know why. And if you look, this whole seam runs up completely wrong. I don't know why, and it's completely offset, but that's beside the fact. So like I said, if the shingles aren't put on properly and the gutters, like this one is a lot tighter than it should be, there's literally an inch gap, then these can be a little difficult to get in. If the gutters are installed right, which is about 50% of the time, then these will go in with ease. So like I said, we're gonna lift up this shingle right here. We're gonna get this corner in there as far as we possibly can. All right. And then we're gonna make sure that we have this completely lined up with the back, and making sure that we have this as far over as we need. So right there, we got it about 95% covered. We're gonna go ahead and add in our zip screws. All right. So we're gonna take our first one, and we have a little bit of an overlap here. So we're gonna put our first one, making sure that we're going into the gutter. All right, like that. And then this is a smaller piece, so we're just gonna add our next one right here on the end, making sure that that's secured. And then if we take our fingers here, you don't wanna cut yourself, but we can kind of pull this mesh a little bit closer together. That way we can kind of close up this gap a bit. So you can see there that we have about probably a 1/16 of an inch gap. That is really not a big deal because the leaves are gonna get stuck on there versus, you know, going inside of it. So we're gonna head on here to our next piece. But this pretty much sums up all the things you need to know for the gutter guards. So this is how to do the corner, and then how to install them straight, and then how to cut them, adding in your zip screws, making sure you have an overlap. Again, on the corners, it's kind of difficult to get in sometimes, especially if the shingles aren't put on right and the gutters aren't put on right. So if you do have a gap, like I said, do your best to pull this in. Make sure try to close that gap up the best you can. And then, yeah, that's about it. Now we have our black gutter guard. This is our basic option. And a lot of times with this guard, it has some issues going on because you don't actually put it underneath the shingle. It just sits on top of the gutter like this. And this is a good example of this house because you can see that if I'm just setting it on top of here and I push in, it's not going in, and this lip right here is not feeding into place. So there's a solution to this, and you have to make sure that you do it right. And when you do this, also you got to be careful that you're not overdoing it too much. But the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys this part right here. So this has a little bit of extra runoff, and what this is actually is you bend this down like this, and it covers the lip on the end of the gutter. So when we slip this on here,
If you guys want to see down here so I can show you, this goes down inside of the gutter like this. All right, so it builds kind of like a wall, and then it fits right here on this gutter, so it fits in like this, stays in place, that way nothing can get inside of there, but it actually goes underneath like that. So you can see it's flush, nothing's gonna be able to get in there, but still, you know, it won't go on. So what we're gonna do is, if you can give it a good push and you can slip it on like this, then go ahead. You can see that I was able to actually slip this one on like this, all right? But it is trying to come off. So we're gonna need to add these zip screws in here, all right? And we're going to take our first zip screw and make sure that we are completely lined up over here. Again, we're gonna pull in and on this back gutter right here, and we're gonna go down like this. First screw, all right? And then we're gonna take our second screw here and we're gonna put it in the middle, all right? Now, you can see that when I push this down, you wanna make sure this is flush because it's gonna get a little bit of a raised gap up here. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put the next one in the middle, right here, all right, like so. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add one right here, all right? And if you add one, you know, on the end, you can do that. If you wanna add one last to the second to the end, you can do that as well. So put that there, all right? And now you can see that this part is flush, but from my angle, you can see that it is not flush. So let me show you guys this real quick. All right, so right here, you can see that this is raised, all right? And then this sits back down a little bit, but you can see it's raised up in a few locations. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in a few more zip screws to these spots to make sure that we secure it down because we want this to sit flat. All right, so now that I saw that this was raised a little bit and not flush, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in a few more screws. So we'll put one in the middle of these two that we already have. So we'll put one there, all right? And I'll show you guys this in a second, but that definitely changed this and brought this down a lot from what it was before, all right? And then we'll go ahead and add one here on the end, pull this down a little bit, all right? And if we come take a look again, we can see that this has dramatically changed since the time before. So we'll go ahead and actually throw one right here as well. You know, you can never overdo the screws. I'd rather have, you know, you be safe than sorry. You can see that this is now flush and there's really not too many raise points. Obviously you're going to have a little bit here and there because the aluminum gets a little bit bent, you know, when you're moving these things around, but you can see that this is pretty clearly on there, sits flush. And let's go ahead and move on to the next part. All right, so now that we have this first guard in place, we're gonna go ahead and add in our second guard. You can see here that this angle is so this is a bay window we have here. So this angle is probably about a 32.5. Obviously it can be changed. Well, it's actually probably like 150 or 147.5. But it's opened up pretty wide. So we're still gonna have to cut this because we don't want the guards to just overlap because they'll never meet properly. So we're gonna line this up here in line with our other guard. And we're gonna make sure that these two are touching. And we're gonna see, okay, where does this start? We know that it starts here. And if we look in the back of the gutter, which is about here, we know that it ends there. So we're gonna make sure this is lined up like this, all right? Line this all up. You can see it starts here and it ends about here-ish. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut our guard. So we're gonna place our snips here, make our first snip, cut this all the way through, all right, like so. And now you can see here, we have an angle, but it's not too dramatic of an angle. It's probably, like I said, probably about a 30 degree or maybe a 25. We're gonna take our guard now, and again, we're not lifting up these shingles like we would the last one. We're just gonna slip this under there. If we do have trouble getting it under there, we can take our guard at first and just kind of not bend it dramatically, but just kind of give this a decent bend. That way it sits a little more straight up and down and vertical, so it's not as long, so it can squeeze in there. And the reason why we have to do this sometimes is because, especially on these old gutter systems with these spikes, people didn't really know how to install them, and they just pound them in there and think that, you know, it could be 3 inches apart here and 6 inches apart here. So a lot of times these are too tight and you have a little trouble getting these in. So we're gonna be bent that a little bit so you can see it's on a little bit of a bend.
and it naturally is when we get them, but it's not as much as this. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna line this up and we're gonna see, okay, does this fit? Yep, it fits there. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and slip this under like so, and we're gonna push in, popping this into place. All right, and we can see that lines up pretty well there. All right, so we have our guard in place. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in our screws. So just to show you guys again one more time, I bent this up a little bit here, and the reason why is because it's super tight here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pop this underneath like this. All right, so put it under, pop up. All right, and then we're gonna slide this over, making sure that we line up these two on the end. All right, and we're gonna actually take our hands and push in like this, push in, and we're kind of just gonna smoothen this out until we know that's in place. All right, pull it over here, make sure everything's lined up, smooth this out. All right, and then we're gonna add our zip screws in. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add one here to our first location. All right, like so. Adding one in, and we're gonna add one into our middle part right here. All right, and then on the end over here. So like I said, there's sometimes these don't have holes, so you have to kind of create your own hole. So for this one, I'm just gonna create my own hole, put it there. All right, and now you can see that this sits pretty level. Again, if you need to add another screw in, because you can see that it's raised in one spot, just go ahead, pop an extra screw in. It's not a big deal. And then you can see here that this looks pretty flush, and we're ready to add in our next section to run this way. All right, so now that we have both of these guards installed, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna install this next piece. So we're gonna take our guard again and we're gonna line it up and make sure that we're covering everything this way. And then we're gonna see, okay, where does this need to be cut? So we can see the first cut needs to be made here, and the second cut needs to be made at the end of this point. So we're gonna take our snips and we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut this thing. So we'll line it up, all right, make sure that we have enough. We're gonna cut this here, all right. And then we're gonna see if this fits in place. Okay, that covers everything perfectly. So if we don't have to bend it, we'll see if we can get it in, but it looks like we're gonna have to a little bit. So again, we're gonna take our guard like this, and we're just gonna lightly bend it up. Not a ton, just a bit. All right, making sure that you're not overdoing it in some spots, because we wanna make sure we still are trying to keep this as straight as possible. So again, take your guard like that, bend it, make sure it's all even, all right? And then we're gonna slip it back underneath here, like so, making sure we get it underneath all of the shingles, or all of the drip edge. All right, now we're gonna push this back in here. And if you're having some trouble, you probably need to pull it back out and either do it in another location or there's an issue. So you can see here, the reason why it's having an issue down there is because this spike is installed properly. This spike is installed properly. This spike is a lot higher, and they actually went right through the drip edge. So that's why I'm having trouble getting it in there. So I might have to make an adjustment where I cut this section out, and you can see that on this gutter guard, it actually kind of indented this a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my snips and I'm just gonna cut out a little square right here. So I'm gonna cut this out like so. That way it doesn't affect this part. So we'll take it like that, and instead of actually removing it, we're just gonna lift it up like this, all right? So we'll just lift it back up. That way it can still go in place and have some coverage, but it's not going to affect the guard fitting in. So I can guarantee you that's where it's gonna go. Line it up, get both of those pieces under there, all right? And this is gonna slide in now. We're still having an issue over there, so maybe we'll have to remove this piece completely. So if you want to just bend this back and forth a few times, it's aluminum, so it'll break off. All right, let's try this one more time. All right, so we have our guard in. It looks like it's fitting a little bit better now.
You can see it's kind of pop out in a few places. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in our zip screws to actually hold it in. And then as we make our way down, we'll push it into place. So again, we're going to take our zip screw here, making sure that we have this pulled over completely. If it's not, then pull it over. All right, so that's in place. And you can see that this corner over here is really messing us up. It keeps trying to pop it out. So we'll hold that down there, take our zip screw, and you can see I'm kind of just holding this with my other hand. We're gonna put the zip screw in, and now this one is secured. So we're gonna add in our next one to our middle location to try to secure this a little better for the meantime. All right, so put one there. And then we're gonna go ahead and add in a third one on the end, which is where this problem is happening. So you can see that this is having an issue trying to go in. So we're gonna actually try to push this in the best we can. All right, like so. Take our zip screw, add it in there, and it's kind of at a little bit of an angle now, but you can see that the gutter is still covered completely. So you're gonna have to make some adjustments and kind of use your common sense when you're doing this, because there's a lot of issues you're gonna run into like that. And 9 times out of 10, it's how the first contractors did it. They either didn't use the right equipment, they didn't know what they were doing, or they just did things wrong, like those spikes. So in that example, we had to cut that out there. You can still see that it's a little bit of a problem. So maybe next time you can cut out a little bit more, or solution to that, you can run the gutter guard to that spike and then start a new one after that. But I just wanted to show you a way that you can go around it. I can see here that that's pretty flush down here to there. So we're just gonna add a screw in here, try to tighten this up a bit. All right, see that that's all flush. And then if you look, that looks pretty good. All right, again, you can see that it is a little bit warped here, but that is because of this spike. So that is how you install these gutter guards. This is, again, our basic gutter guard. They're a little bit easier to cut. They're a lot easier to install when you don't have to deal with bending them or anything. But in this case scenario, I wanted to show you guys the most difficult situation to work in. So that way when you get to a normal house, it's a lot easier. All right, so that's it for this video.